The world transforms in ways both subtle and profound when the sun goes down and the last traces of daylight slip away. Most people sleep, safe in their homes, but for night shift workers, the real work begins as the city grows quiet. They keep hospitals, factories, and warehouses running through the silent hours, ensuring the world never truly stops. Under harsh fluorescent lights, they face a world that feels just a little less ordinary, where the familiar becomes strange. The night is when the unexplained emerges, when shadows seem to move on their own and silence feels heavy. The stories that haunt us most come from these workers, people just doing their jobs, not seeking the supernatural, but sometimes finding it anyway. Yet, in the darkness, something finds them, lurking just beyond the edge of reason. They hear and see things that defy logic. Whispers in empty rooms, footsteps echoing where no one walks. These aren't campfire tales. They're raw, life-changing moments that leave a mark long after the shift ends. Alone, every sound is amplified, every shadow suspicious, and the ordinary becomes unsettling. Is it just the building settling, or something more? The line between reality and imagination blurs. We're here to share these chilling encounters, evidence that some workplaces aren't empty after dark, and that fear can be very real. We'll step into the shoes of three workers, a nurse in Manila, a warehouseman in Ohio, and a factory inspector in Japan, each with their own terrifying story to tell. Different places, different cultures, but the same universal terror that unites them all. Prepare yourself. This is the real horror of the night shift, where the unknown is always waiting in the dark. Our first story unfolds in a bustling Manila hospital, the clock striking 3:13 a.m., the so-called witching hour, when the city outside is silent and the hospital's halls seem to hold their breath. Maria, a young and dedicated nurse, worked the pediatric oncology ward, a place where sorrow and hope lived side by side, and every day was a battle for her young patients. The ward was tucked away in the hospital's oldest wing, its walls steeped in decades of whispered stories, laughter, tears, and the echoes of lives that had come and gone. Staff often whispered about strange happenings, call lights flickering in empty rooms, unexplained cold drafts, and fleeting shadows at the edge of vision that vanished when you turned to look. Maria, ever the skeptic, dismissed these ghost stories as tricks of the mind, focusing instead on her patients and the tasks at hand. On this particular night, the ward was unusually quiet, the silence almost heavy, as if the building itself was waiting for something. As Maria made her rounds, a sudden chill ran down her spine, a primal, instinctive sense of being watched, though she saw no one. She tried to shake it off, blaming the sensation on exhaustion from her relentless double shifts and the stress that came with them. But with every step she took down the dim corridor, the feeling only grew stronger, as if invisible eyes followed her every move. The silence pressed in around her, broken only by the echo of her footsteps and the distant hum of hospital machines. Heart pounding, she quickened her pace, eager for the familiar safety and light of the nurses' station just ahead. But the night was far from over, and the sense of unease lingered, thickening with every passing minute. Somewhere behind her, an unseen presence seemed to stir, just beginning to make itself known in the darkness. Maria was about to confront something that would challenge everything she believed, something that would change her forever. In the quiet, she realized the night held more than just shadows and silence. It held secrets waiting to be revealed. The ordinary had become extraordinary, and the familiar halls now felt like a different world. Maria sensed she was no longer alone, her every instinct screaming that something was near. The real haunting was about to begin, and Maria's night was only just starting. At the end of the long, silent hall where the fluorescent lights flickered and shadows seemed to move on their own, Maria noticed the call light glowing above room 413, a room that had been empty since little Leo's passing just days before. The memory of his gentle smile still lingered in the air, making the sight even more unsettling. Assuming it was just another malfunction, as sometimes happened in the old hospital, she took her keys and unlocked the door, her footsteps echoing in the quiet. The room was icy cold, colder than the rest of the ward, and shadows stretched long and thin across the empty bed, as if reaching for something, or someone, no longer there. As she reached for the light switch, a faint whisper drifted from the darkness. "Nurse!" Maria froze, her heart pounding in her chest. She strained to listen, holding her breath, but only silence answered her, telling herself it was just her imagination, a trick of nerves and memory. She flicked on the light. The harsh glow revealed nothing out of place. The room was untouched, the bed perfectly made, the linens crisp and undisturbed, as if waiting for a patient who would never return. She moved to reset the call button, her hands trembling slightly as she tried to steady her nerves. Suddenly, a whisper right beside her ear, so close she could feel the breath. "I'm scared." It was Leo's voice, unmistakable and filled with fear. Maria stumbled back, terror flooding her veins, her mind racing to make sense of the impossible. She fled the room, slamming the door behind her, and ran down the hallway, her footsteps loud in the empty corridor, desperate to reach the safety of the nurse's station. Her colleagues stared in shock as she gasped for breath, her face pale and eyes wide with fear, unable to find the words to explain what she had just experienced. The logical, rational nurse was gone, replaced by someone who had just faced the unexplainable, her world forever changed in a single moment. That night, Maria's skepticism shattered like glass. The hospital, once a place of science and certainty, now felt haunted by things unseen. She had heard a voice from the other side, a plea for comfort from a soul not yet at rest. The experience would haunt her forever, echoing in her thoughts during every quiet night shift, making her question what else might linger in the shadows. The veil between worlds had been lifted, if only for a moment, revealing a reality far stranger than she had ever believed. And Maria would never be the same, forever changed by the whisper of a patient who refused to be forgotten. Maria shook uncontrollably as her colleagues tried to calm her. Some blamed exhaustion, but veteran nurse Teresita understood. Room 413 had a reputation. Many believed the spirits of lost children lingered there. For the rest of her shift, Maria avoided the end of the hall, every shadow and sound now suspect. The voice she'd heard wasn't angry, just scared and alone. That made it all the more chilling. The experience left a permanent mark. Maria soon transferred to the day shift, unable to face the night's oppressive silence. She no longer dismissed her colleagues' stories. Instead, she listened, changed by what she'd experienced. The hospital was no longer just a place of healing. It was a place where the past whispered in the dark. Years later, Maria still remembers that night as if it were yesterday. It changed her view of life, death, and what lies beyond. Some things, she learned, science cannot explain, and sometimes the echoes of the past are waiting for someone to listen. Our next story takes us to a vast warehouse outside Dayton, Ohio, just after midnight. Frank, a veteran forklift operator, worked the night shift alone among endless aisles. The warehouse stood on land once home to a family lost in a fire, a local legend Frank ignored. He focused on his job, not ghost stories. The night shift crew was small. Frank was often isolated. On this foggy night, he moved a pallet to aisle 27. Suddenly, a biting cold seeped into his bones. He stopped, looking around, alone, or so he thought. The silence was deeper than usual. Something was different in the darkness. Frank was about to encounter the unexplainable. Frank blamed the cold on a draft and continued down aisle 27. Then he heard it, a woman humming a lullaby, soft but clear. He killed the forklift's engine. The silence was overwhelming. The humming came from deep in the aisle. He called out, but only silence answered. No women were on shift nearby. Unease crept in. He started the forklift, eager to finish and leave. A motion sensor light flickered on at the aisle's end. For a split second, he saw her, a translucent woman in an old-fashioned dress. She turned to look at him, then vanished as the light went out. Frank froze, hands shaking. He reversed out of the aisle, abandoning the pallet. He spent the rest of the night in the break room, haunted by the lullaby. The practical man had seen something he couldn't explain. The warehouse was no longer just a workplace. The past lingered in the shadows, and Frank would never forget what he saw. Our final story comes from a high-tech factory in Aichi, Japan. Kenji, a quality control inspector, worked alone in a glass-walled booth surrounded by the relentless noise of machines. The factory was new, built on cleared forest. No ghost stories, just technology. Kenji believed in data, not phantoms. One night, as he measured a gear, movement caught his eye on the automated line. No worker should be there. He looked up, nothing. He returned to work, but unease lingered. The logical world of machines was about to be disrupted. In a place of pure reason, the impossible was about to appear. Kenji was about to witness something that defied everything he believed. The night shift, once routine, was about to become unforgettable. The shadows were watching. Kenji saw it again, a tall, human-shaped shadow gliding along the assembly line. It was pure black, moving with unnatural fluidity among the machines. He pressed against the glass, heart racing. The shadow passed through safety beams that should have triggered alarms. Nothing happened. Kenji fumbled for his phone, trying to capture proof. The shadow stopped, turning its head to look directly at him. A wave of terror washed over Kenji. The figure melted back into the machinery's shadows, vanishing. Kenji stared, frozen, unable to leave his booth. Security footage showed nothing, just machines and an empty floor. But Kenji knew what he'd seen. His rational worldview shattered. He quit a week later, unable to face the night alone. The factory was no longer a place of logic. The shadows had claimed it, and Kenji would never forget the feeling of being seen by something impossible. These stories from Manila, Ohio and Japan aren't just ghost tales. They're the testimonies of ordinary people thrust into the unknown. Maria, Frank, and Kenji weren't seeking the paranormal. They were just doing their jobs. But the night reached out to them. These weren't fleeting scares, they were life-altering events. Why does the night shift attract such encounters? Maybe it's the isolation or the silence that lets the past echo through. The impact is lasting, each worker forever changed. Maria hears whispers in the quiet. Frank sees shadows in the aisles. Kenji can't forget the featureless silhouette. The world at night is stranger than we imagine. When the sun sets, a different reality awakens. For night shift workers, the boundary between known and unknown is thin. They are unwilling witnesses to mysteries in the darkness. Sometimes when you stare into the night, something stares back.